Speeding up the next panel. Its title is The Data Revolution, so we're keeping up the pace, I suppose. We're going to focus on health and finance, and not least on data. I want to introduce my panel before I dive a little further into the topic. I'll start out with Vice President Global Digital Health at Johnson & Johnson, Japrit Chahal. Welcome, Japrit. Oh, you forgot to applaud.
You go around here.
Why didn't you take a seat here?
Thank you.
Right. We also have Head of Research, Public Policy, and Institutional Relations at Santander, Barbara Navarro. Thank you. And we have Member of European Parliament, Melchior. Have a seat, Karen. Feel free to keep those questions coming. I'll check Slido. I am going to skip the polls for this one, though, but keep the questions coming. So the background for this panel is that legal frameworks for data governance across the EU are being hotly discussed, has been throughout this conference as well. Question is, what can Europe expect if it can harness all these huge amounts of data? We're going to try to be a little bit concrete here and think forward a little bit.
Sure.
So we'll think of the scenario that EU, in fact, does get it right and becomes a global leader in the digital decade. So what will it take? What will lead us there, and what will it take? So, Barbara Navarro, I'm going to start out with you. Let's focus a little bit on finance and what you see ahead, what trends you see if we're looking the next 5, maybe even 10 years. What are the innovative finance trends that you can spot?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me here. And I'll try to be brief, but if we look at what has happened in the last years, we can see a lot of growth and innovation coming from data, right? These are evidence from countries, and I will highlight two, probably China and the US, but also, India. It's moving very fast to sectors that has growth thanks to data and specific companies, and I will highlight fintech and tech companies, right? Then why I want to go back to look further is because data itself, it's not the driver of innovation of growth, right? I mean, data, what these countries has in common, and probably these companies, is the capacity to also innovate and use those data in an efficient way, right? Then if we look at the technology that I don't want to say that is ready yet, but of course has been developed a lot in the last years. It's going to get better because there is more data, and of course data is going to be more efficient because it has good technology, right? That makes data better. Then looking into this combination, what is expected in the finance sector? I mean,
could you give some examples of the technologies you're talking about here?
I think a good example of that we can apply, let me bring a simple one, right? Chatbots. And chatbots were very, very used and very popular during COVID, right? And because there was such a demand of information and a need to redirect people to whatever, at that moment, hospitals or whatever, chatbots was a great piece of innovation using machine learning and data, and they're able to attend people, quickly, right? Then this is a piece of innovation, but of course, I'm not going to enter into the health space because you will talk a lot about that, but also in finance, right? We are seeing innovation coming from machine learning, and I'm going to get into the 5-10 years question that you ask. Machine learning in a space as fraud, anti-money laundering, it's important, and cybersecurity. We have talked a lot about cybersecurity these days, but also related with customers, right? Customers are demanding to be able to manage quickly, have access to platforms, not only on daily, every second if needed, and operate without any specific agenda or schedule. Then I think that we are going to see a lot of innovation on everything that is customer related, from the apps that today we interact in one way, but that will be an evolution for sure. But also we are going to see a lot of evolutions on payments. We are seeing a lot of that, right? We are seeing not only in the finance sector space, we are seeing, tech companies that are bringing a lot of innovation. Then to your question, we will see a lot coming through, and probably I will just say one thing, one statement that I want to make, let's put it that way. I think that where these countries and these companies has in common is that they benefit from this cross-sectoral data. I mean, the more data this technology really lives to, use data as much as it can because it learns. Then cross-border data flow and cross-sectoral data sharing are critical for the evolutions that we need to see in the following years based on data and technology.
Right.
Thanks.
So, somewhat similar question to you, Chahal. So say we have a patient here with serious health issues.
Yeah.
So how would AI, for example, AI-powered solutions be able to help you?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me here.
A pleasure.
I think from a patient's perspective, the potential of AI and coming from a pharma sector and the medtech sector, the transformative potential of AI and data science is immense. I mean, a lot of speakers have already touched on that, and I'll maybe get more specific around that topic. But when you combine data sets and when you combine artificial intelligence and data science tools we have at our disposal today, you can do a number of things. For example, you can actually figure out how a disease progresses, right? Right now, there are lots of diseases. Francesco from my company earlier on talked about Alzheimer's. There are lots of unsolved problems, rare diseases. We don't know how that disease progresses. With data and AI, you can actually do that. That's number one. Number two.
So can I ask you to be concrete? So we heard before there might be 20 different types of lung cancer.
Yeah.
So how that progresses is an important part of
absolutely.
healing and...
Yeah, not only that, but once you understand the disease progression, then you actually have to fix it, right? Like, what point can you make a difference in the patient's disease trajectory?
Right.
And that's the second part, where the molecules we are inventing within the pharma industry is also guided and shaped by AI today. Mm-hmm. And which molecules will have a better chance of regulatory success and clinical success, that is also guided by AI. So then after launch, we actually also need these tools to identify those patients and sub-segment and stratify those patients as to which therapies are going to be more efficacious. So all these need AI and data science. So coming back to your question, from a patient's perspective, this is game-changing, right? Like that term has been used before here today, but it truly is. I am actively working on a couple of rare diseases, for example, on the retina space and in the pulmonary arterial hypertension space, where we have the potential today to shorten the disease diagnosis journey, which is years, by the way. Patients bounce around a lot because their symptoms are so complicated. And we have tools at our disposal today because of the potential of AI, where we can shorten that journey by 2 times or 3 times. Mm-hmm. So that is huge, because when you intervene early, you change the total disease trajectory. So that's why we're excited about that.
So that was just to line out all the potential. And I just want to get you in here, Karen, because we're going to get back to you on whatever provisions there might be on data and data flow and so on and so forth. But just a reaction to all this potential. I mean, we're talking about preventing money laundering. We're talking about great cybersecurity possibilities, great possibilities for consumers, great possibilities to both diagnose and describe and cure very very serious illnesses. Sounds great, doesn't it?
It sounds like a wonderful future.
Yes.
I only think that it's important that it's not just in one company that the data is stored, because quite often you get a sort of siloed view of what the data should be used for and how it should be presented. For example, in finance, I have a lot of data of how I'm spending my money, but it's sort of tailored to the bank itself, and it's not really tailored to empower me as a client of the bank to get the information and be able to present it and download or use it the way I want. And I think by opening up data so that it can be shared with other companies, with the ownership of the user, then you can empower them to actually find uses of the data that suits the client more than the company itself.
Good point. We'll get back to that, because I want to ask you too, when we're talking data and flow of data, if we want to get to this glorious future that we were just talking about, what's the problem?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with the open data piece. That's what I mentioned, the need to open data cross-sectoral. I think that's the way. The combination of data from different sectors can bring a very, important, can bring better products, better services, and better information to citizens, customers. What it's missing? I'm going to say something, and I don't know how it's going to land. Then I'm going to take but I think that regulation plays an important role, right? And I think that when we talk about data, and I have been 14 years in Google, then I have talked a lot about data in my previous life. But when we talk about data, there is always a trade-off, right, between innovation and privacy. Right? Or innovation, privacy, and security that, a lot of times goes together. Then I think that are these the right things to look at when we talk about data? I mean, probably yes, right? I mean, how I can innovate, how I'm going to protect data, how my customers can take full ownership of that data. Are we getting that balance right? I mean, this is the complex thing. It's always about balance. Are we getting that balance right, or are we very focused on protecting privacy, less on innovation? What is missing here? If I look to other countries and or other regions, and I look, the speed of their growth on innovation based on data, it's Europe growing at the same speed, is growing as much as other regions or other countries. Do we have those champions? And this is what we need to ask ourselves, right? Then what is missing? Maybe the balance.
Because I noted that before when you said that things were moving really fast. You said in China, you said India, you said US. You didn't mention EU.
Well, I have been 8 years living in Asia, and I'm quite impacted by the speed of how they move there. If I look at the top 10 unicorns or top 10 tech companies in the world, I mean, these are facts. I don't see European as much as I feel European, and I would love to see, companies there are not there. I'm not saying that this is only about how we balance data or not. I mean, I want to be clear. I'm saying that, the world is moving very fast. I mean, we know all that, and we know that. I mentioned India, but in a second tier, not because it's in a second tier, is playing a lot of catch-up mode here, and data for India is critical. Then, what these three countries has in common, it's also size, right? And when you talk about data, size matters, right? Then that's another point here, coming to your first question. I mean, where the power coming from Europe is also, the capacity to join forces here, right? Because again, as I said, innovation and data and innovation goes together, and size matters in this case. Then, yeah.
Right. If we were,
May I comment
yes,
on?
you may.
no, I think that's from Johnson Johnson's perspective. I do feel that we have been at least trying to practice that balance. More than 100 years of innovation, more than running clinical trials in a disciplined way, respecting the privacy of the patients throughout. I do feel that that balance could be struck.
Yeah.
I'm positive about that, and I quite frankly credit Google for having the notion of you can have a federated data model. We use that today, actually. In Europe, we have a federated data model where the algorithms and the queries which the scientists are designing can actually ping the data sets residing in more than a dozen different hospital systems. Mm-hmm. The data doesn't move outside of the firewall of the hospital, but the query goes in and the answer comes back, mm-hmm. right? So how can we imagine or reimagine striking that balance as the technology platforms are improving for us to enable to do that? So I remain bullish about that balance, that balance has to be struck, there's no doubt about it. But at the same time, it's not a choice, this or the other. How do we move both forward? Because there's a feedback loop there, like you mentioned. So I really truly believe that we have set up some lighthouses within European ecosystems to kind of showcase that as an example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, but if we're to take that global lead that we were talking about at the beginning, and to cash in on all that potential that we're seeing in whatever 5 or 10 years, maybe a bit difficult to look 10 years ahead with the speed things are going right now, but then at least 5-7 years. What are the steps that you find that the EU needs to take to release the potential, to make it a reality?
And I can go.
Yes, you can.
So I think the first one is bust the silos, maybe use some American term here. The busting of the silos really essentially means that healthcare data, since it's so fragmented, more than any, I think, industries, you have image data, you have clinical notes, you have device data, you have personalized health trackers, and they're dispersed in all these silos.
What's the problem with that?
The problem with that is that you're not able to drive a cohesive picture of a patient.
Yes.
Social determinants of health were mentioned. I mean, the latest research shows that 60-70% of our health is actually based on those social determinants of health. So how do we then link up with the genetic ecosystems and the social determinants of health to paint a picture for the clinician to say, hey, this is what the patient looks like. This is how they will be treated best, and so on and so forth. So I coming back to your question, bust the silos. But busting of the silos also need to be done in a very careful manner, by building trust, by collaborating, by listening to all the voices at the table. And that's where I personally get excited about the European health data space, because we are taking the lessons from GDPR and applying it in one of the most data or most sensitive data ecosystems, which is healthcare data. So that's the way, right? Bust the silos, improve the trust.
And I think it's really important that when you then have opened up the silos, that you're actually empowering the patient and the user to control that data, so that it's not just a query that goes to the hospital and the data is shared, and that the data that you have, for example, from wearables, is not considered a trade secret or something that is owned by the company that produced the wearable, but that it is something that is interoperable and transferable when it's desired by the patient. And I think this can be really important to make sure that you empower patients, and also how you can discover new illnesses, solutions for illnesses or diagnose illnesses that can be left untreated for years. Endometriosis is a disease that many women suffer from, but that goes undiagnosed for decades before it's discovered. The pain is just disregarded, but if you had wearables, if you had data that could show that there is relation with the cycle and the pain that the woman is suffering, then perhaps you could diagnose women that are being disregarded by the health sector if they can come with data and say, this is the data that I have for my wearables from other places, please help me analyze this and find out what's wrong.
It sounds like both parties would benefit from this. Is there a problem with, I mean, this goes in other sectors as well, right? The citizen need to own their own data, the consumer wants to own their own data, as a patient we want to own our own data. When does that become a problem commercially?
I think I do want to first comment on a very important point which the Honorary Member of Parliament made around interoperability. I feel like that is something which, as part of the silo busting, has to be at the table. Like, interoperability is key. But I also think, like you mentioned about this rare disease, when we in pharma industry or healthcare and life sciences are looking at rare diseases, and I have personal experience because I have projects going on in this field, the amount of data you need is immense because the disease is rare, and to really target and find out what is causing it, what could cure it, you need very large data sets. For rare diseases, it becomes even an onerous, a bigger problem than prevalent diseases.
I think also, I mean, some diseases are not rare, but they are unresearched, and especially women are not researched upon as much as men are because we have hormones that shift and whatever. That's very complicated. So I think this could also help actually open the eyes for the health sector for certain diseases that haven't actually been looked into as much as is needed.
Yeah. Look, I think we're definitely on the same page. The question specifically was the question specifically was around what's the issue, right? What's the trade-off? I personally don't feel that there is a trade-off. I feel that the technology is sophisticated enough for us to balance that and bring the patients in. Bring the, make sure that we are winning that trust through regulations or secondary use of data. I think that's what we need to accomplish.
So busting the silos, how does that apply to finance, if we are to look at that, busting the silos, tearing down the...
Yeah, well, this is probably based on the experience of what Banco Santander is doing, right? And probably, why I'm connecting this with Banco Santander is because when you operate in different jurisdictions, I mean, these silos can occur easily, right? And that's where technology is able to break those silos. That's number one. I mean, the piece about going through this digital transformation. We haven't talked about the need to go through digital transformation, but let's not forget that there is a lot of companies going through that journey, right? And that's number one. I mean, it's important to really use technology to break those silos, and I think that in that sense, that is important. On the other hand, and I'm gonna shift into the customer, right? I mean, you really need, if you are this customer-centric or customer obsession that I think that we all are, right now, because that's what the customer is demanding, you need to solve for those silos, right? There are silos that you can solve for as a company, and I think that that's what we are extremely focused on, how to solve for those silos, how to give to the customer the best experience, and that is where technology and data play a critical role, and it's good, and as I said, I mean, I'm glad to be in a bank that is doing that, but there are silos that you cannot break by yourself, right? And you were talking a little bit about those, and those are the silos that let me do another statement. I mean, it is important in this space that is so new or so advanced and is moving so fast, and I'm going to say the obvious, but private-public collaboration is critical, right? And I know it's very basic, but it's very true, because we can't run this, like, not even in parallel. I mean, sometimes we go in completely different directions, right? And these silos that needs to be break, that we cannot break by but not the companies and not, like the regulators or the policymakers, we need to work together. And that, that's where the magic happens at some point. I mean, when you put, the stakeholders together. Let's put it that way.
So fine enough about busting the silos, but it needs to be done together, just like everything else. We're probably back in the old sandboxing, aren't we? I want to ask, do you have another point that you would like to add to the question? What are the steps that the EU needs to take to help make or to release the potential and maybe bring EU within a leading position?
I mean, to be honest, I think that Europe has all the ingredients, right? If there is ingredients missing, I mean, I don't think there is developed countries, there is skills, and we need to upskill as others, but I mean, there is the skills, there is the talent that is important, there is the capacity to innovate, there is the size of the market, and this is about, and if I will probably say two things. If we have the size of the market, let's ensure that we bring the full potential of the size of the market. That's number one. I mean, that's something that we can do. The second comment and last is, are we competitive enough? Are we using in a competitive way all the full potential that we have, right? And sorry to come back again to regulation. Is regulation allowing us to be competitive or the other way around? And I think this is a general question. Then things that we can do and we can change, let's do it and change it. But we have all the ingredients. There are no ingredients are not missing, right? It's just the way that we mix those ingredients and we get this to the full potential.
Do you see a potential for a future even closer public-private collaboration on both regulating and deregulating?
I think there is a huge potential, and I think some of the elements of the Data Act are going to be very important, also regarding trade secrets and the definition of them, and being able to share data and not classify all data as trade secrets, because that is creating silos. And I think it's also important that in the public sector that we make sure that we can share data across public institutions across Europe in a safe way, so that we create a bigger market for the sharing of data across.
You know what? I think we're going to let that be the last word of this panel. I'm so glad that you wanted to share with me both the very concrete examples of the potential that your two industries hold, and to have some responses from our Member of Parliament here. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you.